All right, so this is review session 9. We are going to cover in this review session realism, photography, and impressionism. So this all still falls under content area 4, right? All right, so realism is going to happen in response to romanticism. So that continues us on that pendulum swing of reacting to what has come before. Realism is corrective, which makes it timeless, right? So to have art that is depicting an exact real scene or person or event at the time that it's actually happening. So you're not going to see paintings from history. You're not going to see paintings from the Bible. You're going to see things that are true to that moment in time. Okay, so contemporary life. It's not idealized, right? So our first realism example, one of my favorites, The Stonebreaker by Gustave Courbet. The Stonebreakers has also never been on the AP exam, so this would be a great one to have on your exam. This is a work that depicts a moment of just a working day for these two men. We're supposed to see here kind of this idea of they are depicting this trapping in time, right? That this young man on the left will become this man on the right. They're doing one of the lowest of the low jobs, making gravel. So this might be like, a very basic, unskilled level of construction work, right? Road work. All the symbolism here of us not seeing their faces, so they could be, any day labor situation, the fact that they are of lower class and we can tell by their clothing and their job, the fact that there's no sky, and so we're kind of hemmed in with this mountain of rock that they will eventually be working to turn into gravel. Again, Courbet's not trying to turn these workers into heroes. Instead, he is documenting them. Courbet was very influenced by Karl Marx's manifesto, Communist Manifesto. Not meant to be heroic, but real. He was a great marketer. He would hold the shows for himself. And he was quite full of himself. And then we have our first ever photograph. Well, not the first one ever taken, but the first one we have in our canon. So this is the still life in studio. And what Daguerre is doing here is he's using a process called a daguerreotype that he helped invent. Didn't do by himself, but he helped invent and named after himself. And then remember, he released this recipe, if you will, the process for this without a patent as a patent, but gave it for free to people in France. And so photography grows in France because of Daguerre, and then eventually spreads to the US. This kind of statement he's making here is kind of exploring the idea of is photography art? Is it science? We do have to consider the fact that he selected these items and put them in this still life. It didn't just happen, right? He arranged these objects just like Rachel Roush and her painting fruit and insects arrange the objects. And so there is intention behind it, even though it's a very different process than a painting. Damier is the artist here, and Damier is a French printmaker and painter. He is also a maker of cartoons. And so this is a French cartoon made for a journal. The journal was called Les Boulevards. And it was it's kind of a social commentary cartoon about the fact that photography is kind of taking over Paris. And so you can see at the bottom, every shop is a photography shop. And then Nader was the one who was a little bit of a nutty professor, and he would actually develop photos in his hot air balloon. So this is a lithograph, right? It's print. It's made to make multiple copies. And he's using, he being nadir is using the colloidian method, which is a little bit faster than the daguerreotype. Different artists he shot. All right, this is American early photography, The Horse in Motion by Muybridge. Muybridge here is creating a work that was made at the idea of Leland Stanford, who wanted to prove that a horse, specifically his horse, Sally Gardner, that his feet left the ground all at once when the horse is running. And so this was done to kind of answer that bet, but it also became an important kind of series of photographs to document the speed of exposure time. And so they were able to, photographers at this point in time are able to take photos much, much faster. This was done with tripwires around a racetrack in California. So this is an innovation, advancement. Manet is another one of our bridge artists. He's going to bridge us from realism to impressionism. So we looked at Ong and Ong's Grand Odalisque. Remember, Ong was a bridge. He bridged us from neoclassical to romanticism. Well, Manet is going to bridge us from realism to impressionism because he works in both styles. This is Olympia, a prostitute in Paris, based off of Titian's Venus of Urbino, obviously. Realism, painting what you actually see. And he transfers us into Impressionism. Impressionism is about capturing a moment, an emphasis on light, very loose brushwork, very little dark paint, mostly lights. In plein air means painted outside. The innovation of paint in tubes has come along, which has helped with painting outside. And then the unusual cropping that we see in the compositions has to do with the influence of photography. They are also, Impressionist and post-Impressionist artists are also very much influenced by Japanese woodblock prints. We looked at ukiyo-e prints, this idea of the floating world. So there was a show of Japanese prints in Paris, and a lot of these artists attended, and then they incorporated that into their work. So Monet, Vincent van Gogh, Mary Cassatt. Monet starts Impressionism with this painting, Impression Sunrise, 1873. Notice that there's very little line, more emphasis on color, right? So I said we're going to end the century with an emphasis on color. We started with line, with neoclassical, we're going to end with color. Saint-Lazare train station. I doubt this will be on the exam. It was on not too long ago, but this work is showing the effects of the Industrial Revolution, people riding trains into work. But the main intention of this work, remember, was to paint the light, the atmosphere, the environment within the train station. And so remember, Monet lied to the train station manager, said he was a salon artist when he wasn't, so that he could paint this. And so he's thinking about the effects of steam, of light, how that interacts with iron used for the building of the train station. Capturing a moment. Very much realism, impressionism, very much for the bourgeois society, the bourgeoisie. This is a work that is made by Mexican artist Velasco, but it's really made in the style of kind of an American version of Romanticism. It's here at the end because it's much more like Romanticism, but it's just later. And so this is kind of the Mexican version of Romanticism. So if we think about the oxbow as being the landscape Romanticism in America, in the United States, this is what's happening in Mexico. So what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at a idyllic landscape, and you have these figures in the front. Okay, some dogs, a man, a boy, and a woman, and then you have this scene that kind of stacks backwards. Okay, and so in the background we have these two volcanoes. These were part of the stories of their creation story. Right here you have Tepeyac Hill. Tepeyac Hill is where Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to Juan Diego, and so this work is about pride in the Mexican heritage, their stories, both stories of the indigenous past, but then also stories of their Catholic present. It's a celebration of the land here. This would have been Tenochtitlan here. And it's just kind of romanticizing the view of Mexico. It was made from studies, and so Velasco would go out and he would do little drawings and on-site paintings. He said he painted this landscape so much he could paint it from his memory, which is hard to believe. It has that kind of idea of the sublime of nature, which we see also in Oxbow. Okay. I have said for the last couple of years, just like Rubens, I really feel like this piece is going to be on the exam because it hasn't been yet, and it's got such good content and context. So this is 19th century realism sculpture. If you don't remember the story of the Burghers of Calais, please look it up. Please study it, about these 6 men who were willing to give their lives for their city. This is during the 100 Years' War, the original story, and then it was remade in the late 19th century to honor the councilmen of Calais. So our artist Rodin. Really interesting stories here. He has a very chiseled approach to his sculptures, right? They almost take on these kind of grotesque qualities because of the way they are formed, very rough. They still read as refined because of the material, and this is just his artistic style, but it's a very like raw approach. It's not idealized. Remember, this was a commission and they wanted one single figure put up high, and instead he did 6 figures that none of them seem to be leader, right? They're all kind of intermingling with each other at ground level. Was well known for his study of sculptures like those by Michelangelo, to get anatomy, to get muscular structures and tendons and how the body turns and twists. All right, so we're moving into post-impressionism, post meaning everything that happened after impressionism. It's not neo. Neo is like an admiration for, they're trying to recreate. So neoclassical loved the classical and is trying to recreate it. Neo-Gothic loved the Gothic and is trying to recreate it. Post just means happens after and oftentimes in opposition to. So post-impressionism, well, impressionism focused on capturing a moment with color, very little line, and focused on realism, what the artist actually saw. Post-impressionism is going to focus on what the artist imagines, what the artist feels, what the artist is thinking about as a subjective representation. More emphasis on, or continuous emphasis on color, but it's not real color. It's arbitrary color. So perfect example of that is Starry Night. right? Starry Night was painted partially from looking outside, but also from sketches in a studio. The colors are subjective, are arbitrary, right? The sky wasn't really that color. The stars weren't really spinning out of control. He's painting his feelings about these things. Swirling Impasto was a study of night. He talked about how the stars were like dots on a map. He had planned for this work and created some earlier versions, which are a lot more muddy. They don't have the vibrancy of Starry Night. Influence of the church on his early life. We talked about that. He was also very influenced by woodcuts, Flemish woodcuts. And then it's going to be very, very foundational for the German and early 20th century expressionist movements. And lastly, this is, it's Impressionism, but it's very late. This is La Coiffure, or The Coiffure, which just means the hairstyle, by Mary Cassatt. Mary Cassatt lived in America, but she also lived in Paris at times. She is creating a work here that is studying that idea of the role of women. Thinking about how women, specifically nude women, have often been depicted as for the male gaze, as opposed to just portraiture, right? And so here we have a woman who's topless, and it might seem like that would be something sexual, but it's not. Instead, it's utilitarian, right? It's this idea that she's getting herself ready for work. And the title is satire or irony, because a coiffure would be an elaborate, fancy hairdo. This is just throwing it back in a ponytail. It is a print, and so she was heavily influenced by the ukiyo-e showing of Japanese woodblock prints. So we call this the craze of Japanismo that spread throughout France at this time. So she's kind of combining the idea of ukiyo-e with this concept of a reclining nude to end up with this kind of hybrid style. It's part of a series she did. Very flat, emphasis on line and color. Really kind of impersonal, because we don't get to see exactly who the woman is. Instead, she could be any woman, every woman, getting ready for work. Lots and lots of pattern with stripes and florals with flat in the composition. All right. That is it for review number 9. Oh, I need to end this. I miss you guys. I wish we were together.